think as long as you can get it done. It's all of that. I mean,
I think it helps.
yeah, somebody's there to like
Or if he has
refocus.
something.
Mhm.
Got her. Oh, speak. I look out in the parking lot before a meeting and I see pitchforks and it's flames. I know it's probably gonna be a contentious. Yeah, when they get the
He's
back
ready to go.
Okay.
And
Mm.
boiling. I know something's
he was
really.
excited, so it was fun to see him.
There have been this.
Call this meeting of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency Board meeting of May 21st, 2024 to order. Paula, will you please call the roll?
Tracy Coburn,
Here.
Walter Denstack.
Here.
Kristen Littlebeck,
Here.
Darcy Long,
Here.
Timothy McLaughlin.
Here.
And Richardson.
Here.
Swift
Here.
and Ray.
Here.
I'd just like to welcome our newest board member, Kristen Lillibet. All right, at this time, oh, takes a second. I'd like everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Two.
The next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
Second it.
Peggy seconded. Favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. The next item is the approval of the minutes from our February 20th, 2024 meeting. Were there any changes, additions, or corrections? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move approval of the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Stacy.
And McLaughlin will second.
Thank you, Tim. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
One.
Oh, one abstention. Yes. So, and for those who don't know, if you do watch a meeting online, you may vote, or if you don't have a chance to watch the meeting, if you were not present, you can abstain like Ben did. Thank you. Okay, so next up is our public comment. I know the agenda says that during this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject that does not later appear on the agenda. However, I will allow people to speak if they have something to add at the time of the agenda item. I just want to make that clear. Does anyone have anything that they would like to comment on at this time? Okay, people are making eyes at each other. I don't know. Yes. Yes. Go ahead and come on up, Mr. Griffith. If you'd say your name and address into the microphone, maybe Angie would share.
Better sound system than I remember of this place.
Oh yeah, we're stepping on up.
I'm David Griffith. I live at 409 West 16th. I've been a community member here for 20 plus years. And some may recall that I was once a car dealer here as well. And the reason I'm here tonight is in the support of the Mint. When I first came to this community, I had interesting histories of a historic building in this community. And I watched the people that were involved with it clean it out. I mean, carloads of rubble, and down in its lower level is an area that makes an incredible place for a winery. Unfortunately, in this day and age, stairs doesn't cut it to get to someplace. And unfortunately, the upper now a bunch of other uses, and I've even been there in its earlier days doing auctions. So it's been quite a community center, and it's a really important space. And going back to its history of almost being a mint, as I understand the story, and I honestly am speaking from sketchy memories, that the equipment to have the mint was lost in a storm. And the next time around, they didn't go as far. They ended up putting the mint in San Francisco. And I think it's sort of an interesting story to think if the mint had ever come to the Dalles, what could this area have become? But it has become a wonderful place, and I've been extremely happy to be here. When I left the car business just 5 years ago, people said, "Where am I going to go?" And I said, "Go anywhere. Why? I have a paid for home, and I love this community, and I've met a lot of great people and had a lot of great times." And so, I'm 83, but I'm still glad to be here and enjoying what I do. Anyway, short and sweet, but thank you. I don't know quite exactly what's on your docket for this building, but I hope the future of it survives, because it's too bad they can't make it into what it looked like, 100 years ago. But we all know that there's a lot of buildings in town that are.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment at this time? Yes.
So just to clarify,
In, oh.
is this going to be on the agenda later? Would you rather me speak later or now? Regarding the.
It's totally up to you.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. If you could say your name and address, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Ryan. I live at 508 West 12th Street here in our lovely city of the Dalles. I've been here, Julie and I have been here for 33 years. So I wanted to speak on behalf of my friend Tim Schechtel, Mr. Schechtel, about the Mint Building. I, like David, don't really know all of the details of what is on the table for your consideration of your investment in the Mint Building, but just put together a few notes just to give you a bit of a perspective from me. So, as David had mentioned, I've been with Mr. Schechtel and a few other people who own the building. I've been is in the building as long as Tim Schechtel's been in the building. So we were good friends and have been good friends ever since he purchased the building. It was a dirty warehouse. It was, now it's a vibrant community gathering place. So that speaks for itself. Secondly, when it was a winery under Tim's ownership and management, and then when we lost that winery, he did, Julie and I were concerned that we were really losing a space for people to gather. The clock tower wasn't here yet. River Tap wasn't here, etc. It was really the only place for people to gather. It's really important for a community for people to gather, not just to get drink and get drunk, but to really have fellowship. So we were concerned that we were going to lose that element. And we almost did, as most of you probably know, with the 2008 subprime crisis. It really hit the city, really shut down what we thought was a real good momentum. Julie and I we own a short-term rental. We were the first Airbnb in the city. We were the only Airbnb in the city for almost 2 years. And then the subprime crisis hit, and we really felt that as well. So what you have here with the Mint Building is, and the current owners, Stephen Laurie, they've been able to beat the 2-year challenge. A a lot of small businesses, as you were aware of, they fail within 2 years. And that is a good indicator. They have far surpassed the 2-year challenge as a small business. Again, so there's no community loss here. It's been a vibrant, viable business, you know, property, and you have owners in the building now that really want to expand. So it's all looking good. Mr. Schechtel, Tim, my friend, has proven himself as an owner, as a landlord, and I think most of you know, as a community member. So there's really a known quantity there. You're not dealing with someone that's unknown to you. And lastly, what I think is happening that you should consider in whatever decisions you need to make is we have a lot of landlords downtown that own buildings that do not want to create infrastructure for new tenants. And it has been a deterrent. We've talked with other small business owners that had to either move out of the location they were renting because of that fact. The owner was refusing to develop the infrastructure of the space. And they just want to charge their rent and not develop for new tenants. So here you have a landlord who's wanting to develop a building and wanting to increase the odds that the owners of Freebridge are even more successful than they are and continue, you know, the momentum of our community as far as really having some social spaces. So I think whatever that means to you in your considerations, you're hearing it from me that this is a wise decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your input. Is there anyone else who would like to speak now during public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to our public hearing. Did you guys have wording for me for the public hearing? Okay.
Hi, Chair Long.
Yes. Oh, there you
Hi.
are. Hi, Jonathan.
I'm here. I can't see anybody other than Angie on the screen, so I didn't know what was happening in the room. Hi, Angie. And so it seems like there is a need for a script for tonight's hearing.
There is.
All right. I'm happy to prepare one. I will, this is for
Adoption of the
there's only
budget.
one hearing. Yes, just the adoption of the budget. I'll use the same one if that's all right that I prepared for the city council's adoption. You'll just give me a
Absolutely.
second.
Mhm.
What would be the easiest way for me to transmit that to you? I apologize. I am working remotely at the moment.
That's all right.
But I have access to everything.
The fastest thing to do is send it to my personal email because it gets stuck in the city server if you try to send it there. And
I
I
will
won't get it
try
right
to
away.
see. Well, without disclosing it here on this public meeting, I will try to see if I have it.
It's okay. It's public anyway. It's darcylong.oregon@gmail.com.
.Oregon. Okay, stand by.
Anybody who wants to can find me. It's okay.
Okay. Okay, well, just in the interest of expediency, I will send
Yes.
this to you without any edits, and I trust
Gotcha.
you to edit it on the fly.
Okay.
It's Darcy. One more
Long.
time, Darcy. It's darcylong.oregon
.oregon.
at Gmail.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and paste it directly into the body of the
All right.
email, and I just sent it.
Thank you.
I apologize for that. While that's on its way, if you'll just give me a moment, I'll try to make some edits here that I know might be helpful, and we'll see how far we get.
Okay. So I have it right here. Now is the time scheduled for a public hearing to receive testimony concerning the proposed budget for the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency 2024-2025, for the proposed budget for the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency 2024-2025 fiscal year. Public hearings are required by Oregon law and certain rules apply. First, I will ask the budget officer and their staff to present the proposed budget book. To expedite the process, committee members may ask questions of the budget officer or staff at any time. After those questions, or if there are none, I will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Any person may testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the proposed budget. After all interested persons are afforded an opportunity to testify, I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Finally, the committee will then deliberate if needed, and I will accept motions. These are the rules. Are there any questions? The public meeting is now open.
Thank you, Chair Log. I will turn it over to our Finance Director, Angie Wilson.
Good evening. On April 16th, the Budget Committee reviewed the proposed budget and approved the budget. And at this time, staff has no recommendation for changes to the budget that was approved by the Urban Renewal Budget Committee on April 16th. I'd like to make a recommendation to move to adopt the resolution number 24-003, adopting the fiscal year 24-25 budget for the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency, making allocations and certifying a request for maximum tax revenue to the county assessor.
Thank you. Is there, oh, go ahead. 24 of the packet, okay. Is there any public comment regarding the budget proposal? Okay, I see none. Are there any comments or questions from board members? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing.
Chair
Yes.
Long, just
Yes.
a point, just to clarify.
Yes.
The public hearing doesn't close
Oh, it doesn't close.
until, yeah, the public hearing stays open and it only closes after a motion has been made.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
public no, it's quite all right. The public testimony portion of the hearing, it seems, is what you should, you might want to close that
Okay.
if there are no members of the public that are willing to offer testimony. But the
Okay.
hearing stays open until the
Okay.
motion's made.
Thank you.
You bet.
So I'm going to close the public testimony portion. Okay, so seeing no questions or comments by board members, do we have a motion?
Actually, Chair, if you don't mind, I have a question of staff. Are we solid on these numbers? Has there been any movement in the last month that would affect the budget with regard to updated costs or the change in opportunity-driven projects or anything along those lines?
Everything's the same as it was at the April 16th meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
I would move to adopt resolution number 24-003, which is a resolution adopting the fiscal year 24-25 budget for the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency, making allocations and certifying a request for maximum tax revenue to the county assessor.
So there's a motion. Do I have a second?
Ringel second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. And we will now close the public hearing. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. Do you need him to repeat that, or just in the future, we'll speak into our microphones? Thank you. Okay. Next, we have a discussion items. Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal District Fiscal Analysis. This is part 2. Mhm.
Can you pull your mic down a little closer, please?
And it just reminds me,
Much
it always
better.
helps to have it turned on as well. Thank you, Josh. Dan Spots, Economic Development Officer. And we have with us Nick Popenook from Tiberius Solutions. And Nick will be leading us through the first part of the first discussion item here, talking about the fiscal analysis, the second part, that is, of the agency. As a reminder, we conducted much of this business in February, going through some of the preliminary findings, including the amounts that would be returned to the districts. The note that we will no longer be collecting tax increment financing as of 2026. That is when we will have sufficient revenues collected to pay off the remaining debt. And actually, state law precludes collection of TIF beyond that point. Still on track to complete the district in 2029. But I'd like to turn this over to Nick for his analysis, and also an economic study that has been completed by Johnson Economics that talks about the long-term value over 30 years of the district. And I'd like to ask Nick to point out some of those highlights from the study. That sounds okay.
Yes, and for anyone following along, this is in the supplement that was sent out later.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan, and thank you, agency board members. I think I will share my screen for the PowerPoint presentation.
We can see your screen, Nick.
Perfect. All right, well, so thank you for having me here. As Dan mentioned, we did do a significant chunk of this analysis back in February, and we had the opportunity to present virtually in February on this topic, mostly looking at where you are financially today and what that means for the upcoming future years as this district finishes its projects and winds down, and then the positive impacts that will be experienced by all the overlapping taxing districts once this area ceases its tax increment collections. We've done additional analysis since then that really looks more historically at the district and estimates the amount of revenue that each taxing district did forego over that period of time, as well as the amount of expenditures that the district invested into projects in the area, and that the private sector invested into this area over that period of time. So tonight's meeting will recap some of that February analysis and then focus on our more recent analysis of those historical investments. So some of the key points from the analysis we shared back in February was how much maximum indebtedness in this district had been used and how much is remaining. That maximum indebtedness is an important limit on the cumulative cost of projects that the district can invest in the area. And through the most recent fiscal year, out of the $29 million of maximum indebtedness allowed in your plan, a little over 23 million of that had been used, leaving $5.75 million remaining. So that plus any amount of funds that the district has other than tax increment proceeds is the amount that can be spent on projects in the coming years. And once those that amount of projects has been funded and all outstanding debt has been repaid, that is when the district ceases to collect revenue and closes down. So with the funds that the district has in the bank today, you'd have the ability to complete all of that remaining $5.7 million of maximum indebtedness. There's also $300,000 of revenue in the bank that came from other sources that can be spent on top of that. So that gives you the capacity to spend roughly $6 million on projects as this district winds down. So while you have that money in the bank today, you don't have to spend it today. You can spend it in the next few years as you strategically make investments in the area. And on top of those expenditures, you do have roughly, I think it's close to $5 million of remaining debt service payments. Those debt service payments require you to continue collecting tax revenue for the next few years so that you could pay off that debt before the area closes down. And we do forecast that to happen in fiscal year ending 2026, so only a couple of fiscal years from now. One of the other pieces that we shared in February was this timeline of the historical investments that the that the Urban Renewal District has made. You know, for a district like this that's been around for 4 decades now, it's challenging for anyone to keep track of all of the successes, all of the projects that it's been involved in over time. And especially as it's coming to a close, it can be helpful to just reflect on the positive success stories that it's had. And so this slide tries to document as best as possible all of the different investments that were made in this district historically, with public projects being shown on the left in blue, and then loans and grants to private businesses on the right side with those orange dots. And we're not going to go through each of them now. We did do a pretty thorough discussion of these back in February, but it's just helpful to keep track of all the investments that the district has made over time so that folks don't lose sight of the long history of this district. This is new analysis that we've completed since that last presentation. This is looking back since the first year that the district received tax increment revenues, which was in 1991, through the most recent fiscal year. And it's an estimate of how much revenue was foregone by all of the overlapping taxing districts. So I think this urban renewal area has been a substantial success, but it's a success due to the foregone revenue that each of these taxing districts gave up over that 3.5 decades. One of the districts that shows up on here, and a district that has the highest dollar amount listed by it, is the North Wasco County School District with $9 million of foregone revenue. However, that line does have an asterisk on it because our state school funding system means that despite foregoing those local property tax revenues, there wasn't any direct impact on local school funding. The state legislature determines what that school funding amount should be per student with various adjustments, and they hold that true for every school district across the state. So when anything happens that makes tax revenues go down locally, that results in the state providing more funding to that school district to bring it back up to the level it's supposed to be. And conversely, when anything happens that makes your local property tax revenues increase, then the state will reduce the state revenues being sent to that school district to bring it back down to the same level as every other district across the state. So the school district has an asterisk. The similar issues apply for the education service district and the community college. So when we look at the general government districts that are more directly impacted, we see the county and the city as the largest of those two, as well as the Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue District. So certainly significant numbers, though it's important to note that these numbers are stretched out over a 3-decade period. So it's not like these numbers were occurring on an annual basis, but started off small and gradually grew over time as investment occurred in this area. This was a slide I think we included in the last presentation. This is estimating how much more we think will be foregone over the next few years as this district wraps up. So again, a few $1 million of more impacts. Same story on the education districts where they are not directly impacted. So we're looking at the general government districts, and you can see the city itself with $750,000, the county with $1 million that would be foregone over this remaining 3-year period. Our focus then shifts to what happens after this district closes down in 2026. So just a few years on the horizon, and these districts that have been foregoing this growth in tax revenue for the last 3 or 4 decades will now reap the benefits of that growth in the tax base. So due to all the private investment that has taken place here, the assessed value of this urban renewal district has grown very significantly. And because of that, when this district closes down, we'll see property tax revenues to all of these overlapping districts increase by a cumulative amount or total amount of $2 million per year. So that's going to be a boost to the city's general fund of $350,000, a boost to the county of $500,000 per year. Again, the school district will see higher local tax revenues, but the state will offset that by a reduction in state revenues. So no impact one way or another on them. The last piece of analysis that we did worked with Johnson Economics. Johnson Economics, Jerry Johnson is a PhD economist, may have, I would say, the most experience of any economist in the state of Oregon when it comes to looking at real estate economics. He's been doing this sort of consulting work basically for as long as this urban renewal district has been around. So we work with him on a number of projects, and we worked with him here to estimate the amount of investment activity that had taken place inside the urban renewal district over the last 35 years, and to illustrate what those economic impacts have been from all of that investment taking place here. I believe in the supplemental packet that you all received, we included a technical memorandum that Jerry put together. That's a draft document, but it includes all this information with some additional details and caveats with it for anybody who wants to do a deep dive into a dozen pages of economic analysis. The table that we're looking at here shows the amount of historical investment in the area, two sets of columns. The first set is showing those investments in the dollars at the time that they took place. The second set of columns has adjusted all of those figures and shows them in today's dollars. And as an example of that, in 1991, our analysis estimates that there was roughly $3.3 million of new construction activity that took place in this area. But if you convert that into today's dollars, that's the equivalent of $7.7 million of construction activity due to the large amount of inflation that's occurred since that point in time. So both sets of numbers are the same. They're just being shown in different measurements. We see here that over that period of time, we're estimating $68 million of new private construction activity that's occurred in the area, and $23 million of urban renewal direct investment into this area. That's excluding administrative and debt service costs of the urban renewal agency. When we adjust that for inflation, we're looking at $114 million of private investment and close to $35 million of urban renewal investment in the area. I will note that it looks like there were no investments going on in the urban renewal district in the early year. That is not the case. Investments were lower at that point in time because there wasn't as much cash flow, but we simply don't have the detailed financial records from the 90s to feed into this analysis with the level of detail that we needed. So that's why there's a bit of missing history there. The top chart on this slide is showing those same numbers from the last page, but just in a graphical form. The green bars are showing the private investment that occurred over time. That's adjusted for inflation. So those numbers in those early years look fairly large, but they would have been much smaller back then. They just inflation adjusted are significantly higher. There's also in the mid 90s when we see a lot of this going on here. There were a lot of significant changes happening to Oregon's property tax system. Our method of estimating construction value, piecing it together based on historical assessed value data, there may be some artifacts in the data from the changes in the way that assessments were taking place. So it's possible that these numbers have been inflated due to changes in the tax system at that point in time. At the same time, I think there's reasons why we may be undercounting some recent investment activity that may have occurred here. The bottom chart on this slide shows the estimated job creation from this investment, with the blue figures being the amount from construction. So every year where construction's occurring, there's significant jobs related to that. But as those buildings are completed, and this area is largely a commercial employment district. So all of that construction activity, the businesses that then locate in those buildings support a lot of employees. And those employees shop then and spend their money throughout the rest of the regional economy, which supports more jobs that spread throughout the county there. These are estimates. Again, we did not have the scope. I don't think anybody would have the scope to go to each of these businesses located within the district and do a survey of their employment levels currently and historically. So these are estimates based on the amount of construction activity, the estimated square footage that corresponds with that, and the typical employment ratios per square foot. So a lot of kind of broad assumptions going into this, but an effort to estimate the amount of employment activity captured by this historical investment in the area. I'm going to skip over the tables on this slide because the key figures from them are shown on this next slide as well. Though, again, if you want to dive into the details, that draft technical memorandum includes more information on it. This is a very similar chart, but this is showing the multiplier effect, the ripple effect from the direct investment that was occurring on that previous slide, the jobs that are actually located within this area. And now this is showing those jobs plus all of the additional jobs that ripple throughout the economy. So if somebody works at a grocery store in the area and then they take that paycheck and they spend it at the local gas station, a local restaurant, that supports employees at those businesses. And so it's a multiplier effect that ripples through the economy being shown here. And ultimately, we're estimating that all of the businesses that have been invested in this area over the last 35 years are supporting throughout the regional economy 1,500 employees on an annual basis. Again, this is just an estimate based on the available data that we have, but it really shows that the city itself is the economic engine of the county, and this particular urban renewal district has had a lot of employment development within the city over that 35-year period. The other figures besides employment that are located on here, labor income, and then output. Output is the equivalent of gross domestic product that you might hear about in the news, but just at the county level. Those previous slides focused on the economic impacts. These final two slides focus on the tax impacts from all of this development. So this is showing the estimated taxes that were generated from all of the construction activity. So these aren't permanent ongoing taxes, but temporary taxes that were paid while the construction was occurring. And it shows an estimated $18 million in taxes at the federal level and $9 million of taxes at the state and local level, including a significant amount of property tax. One line item you see on here is sales tax. Sales tax in this context is not talking about a broad-based sales tax, which we don't have here in Oregon, but talking about gas taxes, cigarette taxes, liquor taxes, all the products that do have specific taxes attached to them. So when the construction workers go out and buy those things, they are paying those taxes throughout the county. And then this slide is estimating the total economic impact, again, throughout the entire county from the economic activity taking place in this area and the ripple effect and multiplier effect throughout the county. These are the ongoing estimated impacts, supporting $20 million of federal taxes and $11 million of state and local taxes combined. One thing sort of to keep in mind that before we transition over to the second portion of today's presentation, I didn't have a formal wrap-up slide here, but these are all estimates of this long history of the urban renewal district. And we are limited in the information that we have access to when you're looking at such a long history and trying to dig back into records that are 20, 30, 35 years old, especially with the limited ability we had with the county assessor's office to provide detailed historical records. So I wouldn't say that every one of these numbers is exactly ironclad, but I do think that all of them are reasonable estimates that tell the story of this urban renewal area. And not all of those economic impacts are directly because of the urban renewal area. We know that some of this investment would have happened anyways. But the urban renewal area was making specific targeted investments in infrastructure and in public-private partnerships for the purpose of facilitating this economic development. And I think it's certainly reasonable to say that a lot of this economic activity that we're seeing was spurred on, was facilitated by the investments of this urban renewal district. And the urban renewal district was certainly a contributing factor to all of the construction activity that's taken place here over that 35-year period, which has had very real and very significant economic and fiscal benefits. And those benefits have come at the cost of those foregone revenues to all the overlapping taxing districts. But I do think that this is a tool where those trade-offs are worth it. And now that the district is coming to the end of its lifespan, all of those districts that have been patiently waiting to receive the benefits of this area will very shortly start to receive those benefits with increased property tax revenues that come from closing this district down. So this is all our draft analysis. We will be putting together a final report on all of this that we'll deliver to you in the coming weeks. So you'll have additional details on this. And I can pause now for questions or discussion on this before we transfer over to Elaine for the second half of this presentation on the upcoming projects in the area.
Yeah, may I? One question. Thanks, Nick. This is Dan Richardson. One question for you on an early number. You said that we have a maximum indebtedness of 29.1. We've spent about 23.3. In that 23.3, I just want to confirm my understanding that that includes the money we have allocated for the Basalt Commons project. This might be a staff question.
That only includes expenditures that have actually occurred through the end of fiscal year ending 23. So
in other words, is the 6 million inclusive of the Basalt Commons project, or is that going to come out of the 6 million?
The Basalt Commons hasn't been expenditure.
Right, it's been allocated. So when we have 6 million left to spend, we'll subtract, I think, the 1.3 or something from Basalt. So it would really be like 4.7 that's not allocated. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can someone clarify for me? So on that page 2 of the slide presentation, so the maximum indebtedness remaining is about 5.7 million. How much of that needs to go towards debt service as opposed to being used for future projects?
Yeah, so with maximum indebtedness, none of that goes to debt service. That's specifically a measure of the amount of remaining capacity to spend on the principal cost of capital projects. So the 5.7, that's all money for real projects to spend in the area. You have debt service costs on top of that, but anytime you're making debt service payments, it doesn't count against your maximum indebtedness. So you can collect as much tax increment revenue as you need to pay debt service. That's unlimited. It's only the amount of the principal amount of your capital projects where you are limited by your maximum indebtedness.
That's where the TIF collections continue until 2026. And at that point, we cut them off because we can pay that debt from those.
Quick question. So program income is what?
Yeah. Program income is the industry term for any source of money that is not tax increment revenue. Traditionally, the main sources of program income that we see for urban renewal areas are proceeds from land sale or rent from property that you own and are renting out to a private entity, repayment of loans that you might make to local businesses for things like facade improvement programs or tenant improvements. Or if the urban renewal area itself receives any grant funding, as opposed to those funds going to the city, if they came directly to the urban renewal agency, any source of funds that aren't tax increment are termed program income. And those dollars are not subject to the maximum indebtedness limit. So that's where we look at the funds you have in the bank, the 300,000 of them were determined to be from sources other than tax increment. And so that's why we're adding that 300,000 to the remaining maximum indebtedness for your real capacity to spend on projects going forward.
Case in point, interest on the Commodore coming in at 1% per year. A couple of minor sources like that.
Okay. One other question to maybe tag along was the cost for the program. So like Urban Renewal pays city staff, right, to do the work. Is that come out of like the 5.7 million?
That does, right. So
Okay.
I say it's capital projects, but it's capital projects and the administration of those projects. Those are both limited by the maximum indebtedness.
With those salaries being split between city and urban renewal, depending upon how our time is spent.
Excellent questions. Any additional questions, comments? Nope. Okay. We're ready for Elaine.
And Elaine, I can keep advancing the slides for you if you'd like.
Sure. Hi, I'm Elaine Howard. I've met with you a couple times also. I have a different consulting firm than Nick's, but we coordinate on projects. Almost all our projects have for the last like 15 years. And next slide. So my role in this project is to look at, given that you have a relatively short time frame left and a smaller amount of money, to look at how you might want to spend that money in the years that you have left to reach your maximum indebtedness. So we've been working with your staff on identifying those potential projects and then tying those projects to the goals and objectives that you recently updated. So the projects that we've been discussing are continuing your incentive program to work on improving the buildings in your downtown and to get some of those upper stories rehabilitated, and to do downtown residential. So that's the first program that would continue. And then the First Street improvement project would be, it's a project that you have been working on for a long time, have a lot of the pre-construction work done on that. And so it's completing that project. And then the Tony's site redevelopment, and then a potential Federal Street Plaza, which is directly adjacent to the Tony's site redevelopment. Next slide. So looking back at the relevant goals and objectives that you reviewed and adopted earlier in the year, Objective B was to make strategic investments of urban renewal funds and engage in various urban renewal activities, which increase the value of properties within the urban renewal district so that the area will contribute its fair share to the cost of public services. C, to make strategic investments that return unused and underused public and private properties to productive condition, consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and implementing ordinances. Next, Nick, please. D, to participate through land acquisition, disposition, rehab loans, and other activities in specific opportunities for business, civic, residential, cultural, and tourist-related property to be developed, redeveloped, improved, rehabilitated, and conserved in ways which will accomplish any of the following goals. And I've just picked a couple of those goals that were listed under D. To encourage the expansion and development of businesses that will expand property values, produce jobs for the people of the Dalles and Roscoe County, to ensure a more attractive, functional, and economically viable city, to expand availability of family wage housing, including but not limited to vertical downtown housing and multifamily residential housing. To number 7, support the development of public spaces downtown. H, to install and maintain coordinated street furniture, night lighting, and landscaping in areas of maximum pedestrian concentration, including alley rights of way and in the downtown area. And J, to identify and actively pursue external grant and private resources in order to leverage the agency's financial resources to the maximum extent possible. So when we look at the 4 project categories and look at those goals and the objectives, you can see that those categories align very well with your goals and objectives. And your staff has added in the potential costs of those projects. So the incentive program would be 1.7 million, the First Street improvement 6.6 million. Tony's property, there isn't a number identified to that yet. And then the Federal Plaza, 700 and a little over $700,000. Next, please. This is a rendering of the Federal Street Plaza right next to the Tony's site redevelopment. So it shows a fairly simple plaza idea. Next slide. I just happened to be up in Walla Walla on work 2 weeks ago, and they had done something very similar. So I sent these pictures down to your staff, Dan and Joshua, to show them how effective this kind of plaza can be. So this is the same thing. It is a street right-of-way that was vacated to develop a small plaza. Opposite this plaza are 7 different restaurants that can, during nice weather, people can order food to go and feed out onto the plaza. And it's also a place where the city organizes other activities. This is just recently constructed. And then we can go through the next slides, Nick, and just look at some other views of it. So this is an aerial view of it, vacant. Next slide. This is, a night view, shows just a really nice addition. Yeah, go ahead, Nick. Another day view with people actually out using it in the morning, drinking their coffee. And next slide. Next slide. So I sent those to your staff, thinking about your Tony site redevelopment and the potential for the Federal Street Plaza there, and just helped get me really excited about the potential that that project could do or have on your city. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this portion of the projects. And maybe, Nick, what you want to do is go back to the slide that has dollar numbers and the projects listed. Yes, this one, to see if there are any questions. This would actually use up your maximum indebtedness when you add in any administration to these costs. So it's important to look at these and see if these are the right projects. And since we are so close to the end of the district, it's important to know which projects you're going to move ahead and which projects that were maybe anticipated in the plan won't be done because potentially these projects would be done. So open up to questions.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. You said that these projects would use the rest of the funds. I mean, as I look at it, it would more than use the funds, meaning we can't do all these projects because we don't have enough money. Is that correct?
Nick, do you want to jump in here? Because I think you have enough money because you have some beginning fund balance, but Nick, maybe you can help answer that better.
No, I didn't develop these costs, but you do only have $6 million of capacity to fund projects in this area. And this is a $9 million project list with the Tony's property cost still to be determined. So I don't know, maybe if city staff were anticipating that there would be additional sources of funds to help contribute to some of these, like First Street.
Maybe this is a question for staff.
Yeah, I think this went a little out of order here. I think Dan can probably go through his agenda staff report here, to kind of fine tune some of these things. You're totally right. This is a $9 million list. We'll explain some more. There is $3.8 million set aside in Fund 18 that the agency has already transferred to the city. So I think having some more background on that might help a little bit more as we guide this conversation forward. Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, so with that, I would like to, but we are very much aware of that. And, we have a long laundry list of projects within the incentive program alone. And no, we would not be able to do all of those. One of the things that we hope to do tonight is to establish some modifications to the incentive program that would provide some flexibility and allow us to do at least some of them as we get additional costs nailed down for some of those potential projects, and balance that against the cost of First Street, including any contribution that the city might make to First Street that would help offset that. So there are some continuing conversations underway that will, I think, help address that question. At the end of the day, no, we don't have enough money to do everything, but we should have enough to do First Street and some of these projects. And the intent here tonight is not to bring forward a list and ask for your approval of specific projects. We had discussion earlier on the Mint, for instance. That would be one of the projects we would bring forward a little bit later on, but not tonight, nor other specific projects. But we do want to have that broad discussion about some of the major ones. First Street, what the impact might be on that and going forward. So with that, I want to go into the staff report, if I may, and kind of talk about this starting on page 35 of your report there. So I started this by kind of going over some general history and how urban renewal actually functions. It's kind of a primer and a reminder of some of what we've done, but also just basically what is the role of tax acre financing? What is it? How does it work? How does it help fund projects? And going on from there, leading up to a couple of things that will be coming down the pipeline, one in June, as part of an overall revision of the plan that was established in 2009. So over the past several months, 6 months probably, on a couple of different occasions, we've talked about the goals and objectives and have reviewed those, revised those. Those appear on page 52 of your packet now as they were most recently revised. That will be one important part of the urban renewal plan revision. Tonight, we'd like to spend more time on the revised project list. And when I say project, I'm taking a broad definition of that because I'd like to talk about changes to the incentive program itself. Some changes also to the development funding agreement process, but primarily on the incentive program. Done a lot of talking with businesses over the past several months, and the feedback is that there could be additional flexibility in some of the way that we are doing some things here, providing some additional funding beyond what we've been able to do. And again, with the idea of trying to expend as wisely as we can on as few projects, as many projects as we can, but trying to get them done properly, and also putting some parameters and some requirements on projects that we do fund. Timelines, for instance, even performance bonds, things of that nature. So on incentive program, starting on page 37 of your packet, we'd like to basically restructure what we've been talking about doing. There are not radical changes, but there are some differences in terminology and some changes in what we're doing, how we would be doing it. So we'd be talking about basically establishing a large grants. And this is kind of like the mix. We've had confusion over the consolidation of commercial grants and mixed use in one project, putting those together. And okay, mixed use requires a residential element. Can we drop that residential element leave the incentive for residential development through the SDCs that we pay. That doesn't change, but drop the requirement for residential from mixed use and simply put commercial and mixed use together into a new program called large grants, $150,000 subject to board approval. The only change would be that the residential component is no longer there. So if a business owner or property owner wants to conduct $150,000 worth of commercial improvements without residential, and I'm kind of getting to the Mint here because the Mint doesn't have residential. So that's, just to give you a hint of where we might be going on this type of thing. Small grant, maximum grant, still 50,000, what we're doing now. System development, again, what we're doing now, 10,000, up to 10,000 per residential unit. And then residential upgrades. This is a new one because we've had some interest from some individual residences. These are not multifamily, but these are single family residences. There are a handful in the district. These are typically vintage homes and they could benefit from some minor improvements, some HVAC improvements, for instance. So this is a very small program capped at 25,000 that would again add value to the tax base. But we're talking about individual residences. And again, there are not a great many of them, but we've fielded a few inquiries on that one. To give match amount here, there would be a match of 25% required.
I just want to clarify what you just said, that an expenditure on, say, an HVAC unit increases the value of a residence.
For instance, increasing the, adding air conditioning, replacing the heating unit, something like that. Josh, you have some
Yeah,
other
there's-
examples?
The county assessor would need to comment on exactly there's the mechanics of it, but yeah, it's if we want to be, clarify here, it's definitely not the like for like. If you have floorboard heaters, inefficient, or in wall heaters are inefficient, you put in a heat pump or a mini split system, it makes for a more efficient system and it can increase.
Okay.
Go on to another one on the bottom paragraph on page 37 talks about eligible projects. This would be a change from what we're doing now, and it would be in some ways returning to what we used to do. Earlier days of urban renewal, we repaired roofs under the thinking that if you don't fix the roof, the rest of the building continues to deteriorate. So this is kind of a twist on that one. We are recommending a return to repairing, replacing roofs in the district, but only when that is part of a larger project. So if that is integrated within development of, for instance, of residential units or additional commercial below that, a standalone roof repair would not qualify, but if it were integrated into a larger project, it would. The same with another big ticket costly item, and that's fire suppression sprinkler systems. And this is a case in point with the Mint, not the only one. There is a tremendous dialogue going on now nationally at the state level and here in this community about changing insurance requirements in the area of climate change. I had a meeting last week with representative of the State Insurance Commission, local restaurant owner outside of the district who had a $22,000 increase in his premium in 1 year. 5 years ago, his premium was $8,000. And the cause being that the restaurant does not have a sprinkler system and is located in an area of high wildfire risk. This, despite the fact there are no trees around, it's on the river and it's in Mid-Columbia Fire District coverage territory. But those are the broad things that are happening in the insurance world. There are a number of restaurants here in the Dalles that do not have sprinkler systems. The Mint does not have a sprinkler system. So these are expensive, high-ticket items, and we certainly would not have resources in our existing budget to put sprinkler systems in all of these. Part of the thinking and what we're doing here, and speculative down the road, if the agency were to continue, new district down the road, could we be setting some guidelines in place that would look down there, as well as trying to do something more immediate now? Whether it's the Mint or whether it's one or two other buildings here in town that don't have sprinklers, if we could have that flexibility to expand the footprint of potential sprinklers, fire suppression, that's something that we would propose. On the following page on 38, I start to talk about some of the projects that we would like to bring forward later on. And again, we don't have the money to do them all, but once we take a close accounting of the cost of First Street into consideration, any possible city contribution toward that, and existing capacity, what might we be able to do with some of these? And actually, it's not as far off as you might think. I've done a thumbnail budget scenario of several of these projects together, and I'm coming up with less than $1 million. There are a couple of big projects that I don't have an answer on yet, which will certainly add to that, but we're not talking $5 or $6 million, probably under $2 million. Probably. Details to come as we get more information. But I wanted to put these in by way of example. There's been a lot of discussion on Federal Street Plaza earlier, and I really appreciated Elaine's comments on that. I'd want to emphasize that's a goal at this point. It is something we'd like to accomplish, and not bringing that forward as a project within this discussion now, but rather as a goal. First Street, on the other hand, that is one of the projects that we need to address. And we'll have a slide deck a little bit later on that will show you graphically if you haven't seen it already, what we're up against with First Street. Beyond that, well, I do have First Street on that same page, 38. We also have Basalt Commons. Basalt Commons is not in the urban renewal plan, of course, because the plan was developed in 2009. Basalt Commons came along only last year, the year before that. So that needs to be identified. The Tony's site, continuing on to page 39, we have a public comment period of June 10th on the survey that we have out there now. We've had over 140 comments, I think, so far on that one. Many of them trending toward an outdoor public space, and I don't know that that's what we'll be recommending. I think people may be thinking also of Federal Street Plaza, which would certainly be an outdoor space under our vision. But could Tony's be combined with that and still return that to private property? We'll see. But that's certainly where the comments are trending so far on Tony's. Finally, also on page 39, talking about development funding agreements. Here, we're talking about adding some parameters, closer parameters, and DFAs, development funding agreements, are so new. Basalt Commons is really the first one. We tried another one in February that has not panned out. And in kind of reviewing those experiences, we're proposing some stronger measures that we can apply and better define when do we do a development funding agreement, so we can rely less on this. It goes back to the earlier point about the incentive program of that 150 taking residential out. That gives us more flexibility to do larger commercial projects there and basically help steer projects away from DFAs unless they are really big ones and unless they do have some deliverables attached. So job creation being one of those. I've got this under review by several other folks, so I am not asking for a decision tonight on the specific amount here. I'd like to present this more for it. Again, it's discussion item, so we can't vote on it anyway. But your feedback on some of the figures here, job creation, and then some of the investment levels that you see down below. In talking with Nick and others, there are broadly three ways of looking at return on investment. Case to be made for monetary return on the agency investment, specific property through an increase in property value over a set period of years. We did that with Basalt Commons. Smaller projects, it becomes more and more difficult to pull that off, especially when you don't have rapid year-to-year increases in property valuations. It's in talking with the tax assessor, county assessor on a different topic entirely, she's really hesitant to try to pin down these numbers. There are just too many variables, too many changes year to year in tax rates, valuations. Second strategy is a ratio between public and private investments in a specific property expressed as a percentage. If we're putting in 25%, we want the owner to put in 75%, not the other way around. Not 50-50. We want to have a minority stake in that and drive other private investment or other public sources toward a project, maybe other state or federal grants or something. And there is a case in point like that before us. And third, more broadly, agencies measure return by the overall valuation increase of a district is influenced by large-scale public infrastructure investments. Well, that's been the history over 30 years. And as you saw from Nick's presentation, it's kind of hard to say this particular project resulted from this particular public investment. You can broadly say that, but is that the right way to approach development funding agreements in particular? If we're investing in one specific property, how do you pin that down to the broader infrastructure investments that might have occurred around that property? So for those different reasons, we kind of settled on that second strategy, a ratio that can be measured. So a specific project, here's the ratio. I put some numbers down there for discussion. I'm not sure that I agree with them myself anymore. This was a few weeks ago. But the idea being that we assign a project will fall into one of these categories, and there needs to be a corresponding limit on the public investment for that particular project. And this would apply to some of the specific projects we'd like to bring forward later on in June or later. So again, take these numbers with a grain of salt. It's a starting point. It's a concept. Whether those percentages are what we want to end up with or not. And I can have feedback tonight or take it with you, think about it, and come back. I'd like to pin these down though, if this broad concept makes sense. Deliverables going on to page 40. One of the comments we've had on projects, when is it done? When does it start? When is it done? We have that with the enterprise zone. There are some set limits, 1 year, 2 years, 3, 4 year construction in progress, so on. We don't with DFAs. So we're proposing that development funding projects must start construction within 6 months of the agency decision of award and must receive a certificate of occupancy within 2 years of the award decision. Recipients must post a performance bond in the amount of the award to ensure compliance. Bond may be forfeit at agency's discretion if the project fails to meet a completion timeline. May seem kind of like hardball, but we don't want to be in the situation of tying up agency resources for years and years and years when they could be expended elsewhere. And we've got one big project out there. We are totally confident it's moving forward. But should we be in the same situation again and then hold up funding? So putting that out there for consideration. As I say here, the board is invited to consider these projects, propose policy modifications, propose other projects at the May 21st meeting. We'll bring this back to you then, I think probably in June, aim for June, and then request that to be an action item at that point. So again, either feedback now or between now and the next agenda packet going out for June. See what I'm missing here. I don't think missing anything. Questions?
Scott Heggie looks like he has a question.
Sorry, I'm trying to note something. Let me just, I'll start here. So you mentioned, and this is a question, but recipients must post a performance bond. Just knowing a little bit about performance bonds, that may not even be, I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but that's not a typical kind of bond that you acquire, I don't think. I mean, you do in construction and different things like that, but what you're asking for here, I would just encourage you to like look into that, whether that's even possible. So I'm not sure it's possible. And even if it is possible, those tend to be quite expensive. So I understand what you're trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that is going to be the mechanism that gives us that assurance and is possible. So I would just encourage you to take a look at it.
Okay, good comment.
And then a couple other questions. So on your the page before that, where you kind of have those project amounts, and then you have it seems to me like, for example, the project amount between 150,000 and 250,000, or am I correct in saying that what's proposed here is like saying that there would be a maximum of 30%?
30% or less.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
a public investment, so urban renewable investment.
Would be 30% or less of that,
Okay.
of that amount.
So what that means is there's a 70% match on that, right?
Right.
Okay. So then I want to go back to kind of the incentive program under large grants. And generally speaking, I like the idea. I mean, I like what you're doing in general in terms of trying to address some of the comments that have come in, trying to make some flexibility with the idea of trying to, help these projects happen. The only comment I would have, it says under large grants, it has minimum match to be 30%. So what you're saying is that we would fund 70% of the project, right? Up to 70% of the project.
No.
Is that right?
We see that.
This is under large grants. It says the minimum match would be 30%.
That is a mistake.
Okay.
70.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that answers
Yeah.
that question, because
That
I was
keeps
going to
it-
say 30% is pretty low.
We're not going to be changed yet.
Okay.
You?
Okay. And okay, well then I was going to just comment that, the higher the match is, the more, the farther the money goes and the more investment you get for the money that you invest. So you've answered my question, done better. So thanks.
I don't have anything like that elsewhere.
I had a similar question, a much smaller amount of money, I know, but a similar question on the residential upgrades is just down a couple of arrows there, or bullet points. Says minimum match 25%. Are
Here again, 75%.
okay?
Yeah. Thinking in terms of what we put in, 25% on that. Josh, is that your understanding too on those?
We put in 75%.
No, we put in 25%. They put in 75.
Yeah.
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 So it's which matches or tracks with the idea of an incentive as opposed to we're just paying the bill.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can I ask just in a ballpark terms, what's a commercial sprinkler system go for now? What is a commercial what's the order of magnitude that a commercial sprinkler system costs these days?
80,000 on one project I've heard of, $250,000 on another project I heard of last week.
It depends on whether or not you're renovating or putting in new. So.
Yes.
And the construction costs to put a sprinkler system in a downtown building with the age of our buildings increases that significantly.
Thank you.
So one of the other things I want to get some clarification on from the board is something that I've been thinking about, which is the fact that the First Street project has become so very expensive. And I wear a dual hat, obviously, with city council. And this is something I've talked with the city manager about. I'm personally leaning toward the fact that the city needs to step up more on the First Street project and also potentially the Plaza project than urban renewal, because we're coming to the end. And I personally am more interested in like the big projects, obviously, Basalt Commons, but also our incentive program that we use for our businesses. And this urban renewal is really the source of funds to do those projects. And I'm worried that if we're putting it toward projects that could have other potential funding sources, that we're short shifting our downtown, this specific zone that's going to end. So I wanted some feedback from other people. I mean, I've been pretty vocal behind the scenes, but I'd like to know what you guys think. Yes.
Well, that was going to be one of my comments as well. It's really hard to look, while I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and I think you guys have done a great job in trying to find a way to make sure all of the money is getting used as quickly as possible to the right places. It's really hard to get a feeling for how much are we talking about here? Because I don't know how much is on this sheet available. I still can't quite get a really good sense as to what we're talking about spending bigger than a bread box, right? I mean, so I think that in itself would be really helpful, is to really understand, are we trying to get rid of or spend 500,000 in the incentive plan, or 750 or what is the number? So I think for me personally, it's really hard to comment on some of these or how much they're going to get used, because I don't know how much money we have left to spend. And knowing how much money we have left to spend might determine how I feel the priority list might shift one way or the other. And I agree with what Darcy is saying, that, you know, that where there's other resources, you know, having our businesses get, you know, first crack at some of that money, I think is really important if that's the only resource that they have. But it's hard to know how much that is. And then I have, sorry,
Oh, go ahead. I'm
one
sorry.
other additional question. One of the things when it said under eligible projects on page 37, when we talked about the roof repairs, do we need to do some sort of, and maybe in your mind it just makes sense, but the term when we say larger renovation project, I guess that seems kind of, what exactly does that mean? Larger than, do you mean if the roof repair is $100,000, you just need to do a project that's larger than $100,000, or what's the definition of what that is? Because if I was applying, I might ask, what do you mean by that? Or I might not apply if I don't know.
Sorry, you mean specifically when we're talking about these large grants and small grants?
The one on, I'm just looking at the bottom of, on roof repairs on, yeah, bottom of page 37.
Repair, for instance, not exceed or be a minimum of 20% of
Yeah,
the
I don't-
total project
well,
cost or something
yeah,
like
I did.
that.
It just
But-
said, yeah, it just said, when it's conducted as part of a larger renovation project. I just wasn't sure what that definition is of larger. Do you mean larger, like by dollar volume, or?
Have a closer
Yeah,
definition of that.
when you said it verbally, you said, you know, if you're going to put in residential, and that makes perfectly good sense. But if I was reading it, I might not know
So we need to
how
have some
much larger.
Yeah, let's add some examples of the residential
Right,
or
right,
offices or whatever it might be.
right.
Yeah, and great point. And I think the reason the reason we added that in is, you know, I know that we've had discussions in the past with the incentive program, and when we're adopting the incentive program, we want to make sure that this isn't set up in a way that it's just a program to replace roofs all over the district. You know, it needs to be linked to something else with some other renovation, or else this is just going to turn into a roof repair program because, you know, old buildings all over our downtown. So we want it to be linked to something else. But yes, we would need to clarify some language. Thank you.
And I do want to go back to the point that Scott raised on the percentage on large grants. So as Josh reminds me, mixed use, the non-public match is 30% now. So is that something that we want to continue to look at?
So yeah, apologies on that confusion. So what is currently adopted with our urban renewal incentive program is up to 150,000 for a mixed use project is a 30% matching grant is required. So this, what we were just talking about, is kind of a flop of that. So that would be the question. If the agency chooses to kind of adjust those percentages, because you're, you know, to your point, yeah, 70%, we are footing the bill on most of it.
Rationale for that on the incentive program about a year ago was to get more money out the door.
Mhm.
But in some ways, the rules have changed now because we, a year ago, thought we had a lot more money than we actually do.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was that, and then also the idea of the housing, you know, trying to incentivize more housing, which kind of makes sense, you know, to some extent. I understand that, but just for a straight project, I mean, to say that you only have a 30% match it's hard to stomach that why urban renewal would pay 70% of just a straight business project.
Yep.
I mean, I could kind of buy into having a lower match for a residential project if we're trying to incent residential units being, you know, developed in our community, but not for straight business projects. So.
And it could be something we could consider as well, keeping the mixed use project there that's at that 30% match to incentivize housing, keeping that intact. But what we were noticing and we wanted to increase the ceiling on these commercial projects is a lot of the input, a lot of the inquiries we're receiving are for more commercial projects. So the 50,000, although it helps, it doesn't really help move the needle on some of these projects. The projects that Dan has laid out in the staff report, as he said, it doesn't total up to $1 million, but each of these projects, $50,000 will help, but just trying to move the needle a little bit further on some of these projects. So we could break it down into having, a separate line item if that's with a different match, if that's what we want to do.
Yeah, and I'd be curious just to know like those residential projects. 'Cause since I've been here, we've only done maybe one or something, but the match is way more. Like the Basalt Commons, the match is way more than 70%, for example. So, it's a residential one. And I'm just curious if like we've had residential projects that have needed that much match in order to make them work, or if that's not even a consideration because the projects are way more than that, even outside of the fact that
I would say we haven't so far, but a couple of the downtown projects certainly would. Two at least come to mind that would be.
do that. What?
Two projects come to mind that would have a potentially residential component.
Oh, exactly. But I'm just saying that the match that the projects propose, I'm just thinking of Basalt Commons. Their match is what, 6%? We're only providing 6% of the project.
Right. Yeah.
So their match is way, it's not even an issue here.
90% or
and I would think the same, it's probably the case in these other projects as well. So maybe the residential element is not really providing a 70% match is not necessary for those projects. So.
And keeping the SGC, I think that's a big incentive.
Okay. And I just had, can I just comment generally?
Yes.
So I was just going to say, based on the project list here, and that's why I asked the question about like, well, how much money do we have, right? Because if you look at the list of projects here and, there's to be determined, which is a big question mark. And then there's all the other projects that you kind of threw out there as maybes. So I don't know. The First Street project is certainly one that's looming, right? And it's unclear to me. It says 6.6 million. Is that project looking for us to fund 6.6 million additional dollars towards that in addition to the money that's set aside? Is that the idea? Or is it so it's actually less because we've already set aside a certain amount?
Yeah, it is less. Yeah, this is the total project cost as it sits right now.
And how much have we set aside? Like how much is set aside for that project is it like in savings or something?
Yeah, it's 3.8 million. It's set
so
aside.
3.8 million has already been set aside to do that project. Has money been spent out of that 3.8 million, or the amount that's already been spent is in addition to that 3.8? Because I think we've spent 1.7 million or something.
Like 1.5 on design so far. The 3.8 is really sitting. It's sitting. It was transferred to the city's account, so it's sitting safe with the city.
Okay.
So it's not. Yeah, it's not something considered in this. Yeah, so you take the 6.6, you subtract 3.8 out of it, and then we've been having additional conversations with the city manager about the city assisting on, potentially up to $600,000. Just take that, further off the list, and that would be the 600,000 would be a contribution to assist with the frontage improvements of all city-owned properties on First Street, which there's actually 8 properties that the city owns, all the parking lots and the old transportation center.
Let's follow the math here for just a second. All right. So First Street is, God willing, and the creek don't rise, is $6.6 million cost for that project. And we have 3.8 set aside in savings account. So the need is 2.8. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. So we need to find 2.8 million. Okay. And Urban Renewal has 6 million total indebtedness, and that's what we can scrape together with the indebtedness and the program income. But we've allocated 1.38 to Basalt Commons plus or minus, which means unallocated, we have 4.7. So far, so good. Is that correct? So Urban Renewal could finish First Street and have like 1.9 left over for other things.
Yeah. Yeah. With those,
Thank heavens. All right.
enough those numbers. Yeah. And one thing to point out too is when we went through with our, back in April with our budget committee meeting, we had one thing I always want to like point out and make sure it's very clear to everybody in the room. There's about $1.1 million budgeted for the incentive program. That is sitting aside. That is not included in any funds considered for First Street. And then there's 2.7 million in that opportunity driven projects that will be used to help pay for First Street. So of these projects that we've listed, these facade projects, everything, Canton Walk, the Vote Building, the Pioneer Building, Sigmund's Flowers, all of those can fall under the 1.1.
And what I want the board to consider is whether or not urban renewal dollars should be the main source of funds for filling in crumbling infrastructure, for example, underneath the sidewalks. That's, it's one thing to do a cosmetic project on First Street. It's another thing to be responsible for infrastructure problems, because I personally think infrastructure is the city's and or property owners. And I'm thinking that our urban renewal dollars are better spent in other ways than those pieces that, and I understand I'm wearing two hats and I understand what that means about saying what I want to do with city funds, but we have other dollars coming in from other sources that can be used for that cannot be used to help our downtown businesses. And at least we don't have anything in place for that. And so my concern is, that it seems easy because we're using city staff to just say, yep, this project that we initially started, we're just gonna, urban renewal is just totally in charge of everything and make sure it happens. But that and even the plaza can happen with other funds other than urban renewal district funds, in my opinion.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So urban renewal has already spent 1.5 million on this project. Is that correct? Yeah. I mean, since the start of it.
Mhm.
Okay. So we've already invested $1.5 million in it.
Yep.
And then the other question was related to the goals or objectives that are identified as tagged to that project, which when I went through them specifically, it seemed like we were being pretty loose about which one. I mean, yeah, maybe it applies, but one of the things on there said, I don't remember what it is. I should be able to find it, but here, let me find it quickly. It says to identify and actively pursue external grant and private resources in order to leverage the agency. So basically for that project, we're saying that applies to this project. And it seemed like there was a grant at one point in time for this project. And am I correct that was pulled back or given back or something? And so the question is there any other resources or grants that could be found for this if that is not the case? Because we're saying that this is applying to this project, but in fact, it maybe isn't.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think really quick, he's been sitting quietly on the screen, and I should have introduced him here. Since we are going to be discussing the First Street project, I've invited our engineer Paul Schmidtke, who has really been assisting with us, and Paul has been amazing. He's, every time Dan and I have a crazy idea about how to cut a cost here, how to cut a cost there, Paul's probably working outside of his scope to figure all these things out for us. He's been a huge help. But to speak on the point with the ODOT, I mean, Paul, you can probably touch on the fact that funds could potentially be available for this project, but one of the reasons that the cost is, it's now cheaper than when we had ODOT is because of federal requirements that kick in with many of these grants. And Paul, do you want to speak any more to any of that?
Yeah. I can't speak specifically to how much the grant was or how much essentially what ODOT would have cost per se, but typically we've seen federal projects and when projects have federal funding attached to them, it's about a 40% increase in the overall cost. And that is due to environmental research that needs to happen and a lot of other factors. And the other factor with federally funded projects is with all of the additional research and other items that are attached to that, it elongates the design prior to construction, which then pushes construction start out and then finalization of the construction out. And that can also increase in just terms of escalation. And so I do know the decision was made, I believe in Q4 of 2022 to pull the funding, the federal funding from the project, and that there was going to be savings and that there was going to be a reduction in the overall schedule of the project. And we're still on schedule to beat that previously identified schedule from federal funding.
Chair, may I comment?
Mhm.
I'm wondering if it would be most helpful at this point to ask staff to come back with, I don't know, like 3 alternative funding scenarios where we say we put it all into First Street because that's sort of the big elephant stomping around the place. We put in, 2 million, we put in half, 50%, some scenarios that we could sort of look at side by side and make some board decision on. So I feel right now we have a bunch of dials and we're talking about turning each of them, and it'd be helpful to have them have as final a numbers as possible, have the city's proposal as final or at least with some hard numbers attached, and just be able to look, okay, A, B, and C, and then we could fine tune and decide.
So I think in order to give staff good direction, I need more input from each of you as far as like generally which way you're leaning. Like if you could have your druthers, which way do you want them to try to work it out? Because I mean, there's infinite possibilities at this point. So we can't ask staff for
Right. Which is why
infinite options.
I was going for like a high, medium, low, like basically based on how much urban renewal would put into First Street, right? And that would drive the availability money for other things.
Right. But at this point, urban renewal can do it all, do, a little. I'm asking the group, do you feel like it's urban renewal's project to do it all? Do you feel like that we need to look for other sources? Do you feel like we should be filling in under sidewalks where it's eroded, or, I mean, things that we didn't know about? I mean, because that's a danger situation. To me, that's the city. That's not urban renewal, but I need to know what other people think. So the staff is getting your thoughts on that too. Yes, Scott.
So I kind of tend to think in the way you're thinking that, this project started, as this underpass and all this kind of cool stuff for the community. And it seemed in that context, it made a lot of sense. In the context that I understand the project, it's less so. So I am less inclined to like be really enthusiastic about it. But at the same time, I think the project is more than I'm thinking. The one caution I want to throw out there, though, is that, and this would be a question for the engineer, but this is an estimate that the engineer has put forth. And, anybody that's ever bid out anything understands that may not be the number and it could be less. It probably won't be, but it could be less, but it could be way more too. So that would be something I just, we should all be aware of the fact that the cost in here is not the cost. It's just an estimate at this point in time.
Yes.
I also add one other point of information to keep in mind on this. The 2009 bond established different projects that we then became legally obligated under that bond to address in some way, shape, or form. Streetscape was specifically called out of that first, second, third, and fourth. Second Street was done in 2002 before the 2009 bond. So there needs to be, it would seem legally, some level of urban renewal involvement in First Street. What that level is, I think, is open to question. But for there to be no urban renewal involvement in that, I think that would probably run counter to the intent of that bond measure, that bond obligation. And that's a conversation that we're having with bond counsel And I think we'll
Okay.
probably need to
So we
explore
still
that
don't
some
have
more.
an answer. So yeah, so I think there's a big difference between streetscape and infrastructure. So yeah.
Yeah, I think to go along with that, that's like one of those input points that we need. I think back from staff is, and I think we've like talked about this before, like when the partnership with ODOT, um, went away, whatever with the grant and whatnot, um, like we have to find another partner. And I think the city is like a pretty easy logical choice. And I want to know how much of we just went through the city budget cycle, right? So like that that is going to go up to city council here in a few weeks. You guys are going to vote on it. One of the things that's been going through the back of my mind is what from Public Works, what portion of street and uh like the street fund, things like that that could be potentially applied to this. Um, and I know we've put money aside in Fund 18, but I think I'd really want to know also the cost and scope for each of the different um portions of the First Street project, because there is like the sidewalk thing is the thing that sticks in my mind the most. But um and I think going along with that, what we're talking about with the incentive program, stuff like that, where there's some sort of match, in my mind, I see the city as, sort of all the business owners are sort of, customers coming to us for funds to put projects over the edge to make it the numbers match or make sense or whatever, right? I think the city is one of those customers, and I think I'd like to know before making a decision, like if we're going to do a 50-50 match or a 70-30 or 60-40 split or something like that. I think that would be really good to know. But ultimately, we need to have a good like put together a list of the things, the items that need to happen on First Street, right? Like I think we know what some of those are, but I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. But I think that would be invaluable moving forward, because I think that'll actually open up a lot more it'll open up a lot more information, but it'll also open up like more opportunities for um funding sources and things like that, from the city or elsewhere that I think would be appropriate. So that would be my ask, is if we could get that list, how much do each of those things cost? And I know some of that is documented already, but I think if we could get down to that and check things off, so to speak, then we can come back and I don't know, maybe we find that we don't really need that much money from URA for the First Street project.
Yeah, and so for some clarification on that, so there is, I think, on pages 50, what are we at? 54 to 56 is the breakdown of the total cost of the First Street project as it sits. To Commissioner Hagee's point, there was a 5% contingency on this. We added a 10% for this exercise here, just so we are overcompensating in the event we see any increases. And in this exercise here, this breakdown, as you can see on the two, where are they at? On the columns to the very right, there's the item cost for UR and the item cost for the city. This exercise here is basically was the city contributing funds for all street frontages along the First Street parking lots. So anything that's owned by the city, this would be the city's contribution on that. So this I would say is one of those alternatives that you had asked about. I would say this is one that I've already discussed with the city manager on, and the one that, as far as the city being that property owner that pays for the frontage in front of their property, This would be one consideration for that. And to a point that I heard earlier, it is typically the responsibility of a property owner to pay for right-of-way infrastructure improvements. However, I would want to add to the point here that the agency, I think, has made a commitment to the First Street property owners over these years, since 2008. So I do think that a shift in looking at it, although the city may be able to foot those costs, I would I would definitely want the board to think about trying to put those costs back onto any property owners along First Street, because this has almost been promised to these property owners for the past 15 years that these improvements were going to be made.
Josh, I don't mean to speak for anybody else, but I didn't hear anyone suggest that. I think we suggested we wanted to hear a couple of scenarios on how the city and URA would divvy this up.
I know, and I was just explaining the fact that I did hear that there is typically street frontages are paid for by a property owner. So I just wanted to point that aspect out. But the alternatives, as far as what you're looking for exactly, these are, I mean, everything that's listed here, the line items that are listed in here are kind of, we've gone through some value engineering on this, you could say, but we also wanted to try to keep the scope what it was. So if you're, to your point, board member Ring, is this something you want us to go through to take out things that aren't needed, or were you wanting us to kind of itemize these on how they could be paid for? For instance, when you're talking about a new water pipe in the ground, is that a water pipe that can be paid for through the water fund? Looking at it, kind of, is that kind of how you're looking at?
Yeah, that's sort of how, because the way that I've looked at this so far, having been a part of the city budget committee, the thing that stands out are on page 54, there's the drainage and sewers. And I mean, I would definitely have to talk to somebody like Director Anderson or somebody to really find out, how much of that, like, is there a larger portion that the city can pay on that out of like the water fund or sewer fund or something like that, right?
Okay.
Just to help offset that cost a little bit.
Yeah.
It would be. My understanding on the 2002 and recollection was infrastructure came out of public works and streetscaping above ground came out of urban renewal. 2002.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to do is I want to be sure to take any public comment that anyone has, not just on First Street, but also how what we're discussing up here affects the incentive program. So I'd like to do that before we wrap it up. Is that okay? You look like you're about to say something. So, okay. Is there anyone that would like to add public comment? Lindsay?
Hi, Lindsay Jamay, 116 East Second Street. Just wanted to give like an overall comment. My husband and I own two buildings here in town. So 201, the old Legion, and 116 where the workshop currently is. We've taken a part of the urban renewal program to do some of the upgrades to get those buildings up and running. When we purchased them, just to give context for anybody that's purchasing a building in town, the Legion building had all the beer bottles still left on the counter when we walked in the door. So cleaning up anything from that to kitchen grease all over the floor to old Christmas decor in the basement. You do take on a lot if you are taking on one of these buildings. We brought back 3 storefronts on the main floor. Those actually, we were not able to apply for urban renewal for those because they didn't require permits to get those done. So as we're considering different projects, I would even encourage, there were probably some projects we could have used some help on because there was a lot of lifting we had to do, but we were still able to get those 3 storefronts off the ground. As we're looking at doing the upper floor of that building,
it's a lot. There are ceilings falling down. We've gotten it down to the studs, but the walls were just falling and all apart. The framework is still there. We had a stairwell cut off. There's a lot of work. There's no electric. There's no plumbing. There's no just any of the infrastructure in place. So when you think of these projects as we're applying for the grants and as you're thinking about the programs in place, for us to do electric, it's $40,000. You move into HVAC, you've got $45,000. Go to drywall, it's $40,000 right off the bat. Plumbing, 35 or 40 is our latest quote. So that's just to get kind of the foundation elements in place. Then we have to get the rest of it done. So we're grateful to, even for the program, we're working on getting the $50,000 to try to get that portion going. But if you're reconsidering some of the programs to increase those levels, I'm sure it'll help us get some movement a lot faster on getting that piece up and running. So I just wanted to say, as you're thinking about these programs, even a little goes a long way. So as you're thinking of allocating those dollars, the incentive program has made a big impact. Over at 116, we purchased it after being vacant for 3 years. The air conditioning unit was decommissioned. So it was not functioning at all. So we were able to use the program to get that up and running. We were able to add a commercial kitchen. So now there's a coffee shop downtown. So, we're grateful this program exists. I encourage you, as you're thinking of First Street project, helping some of these buildings get up and running, I don't forget about some of the small projects that actually could go a long way. Because I think overall we've probably had help of $30,000 from River and Renewal, I think, across both buildings. Maybe not even 20,000. And we've been able to do a lot. And so I'm just thinking of the allocation of dollars. And then my other question is your First Street versus the Federal Street projects. Think about what the vision is for downtown. And it's something that I've struggled with since we've moved here 4 years ago. Is it historic? Is it not historic? What are we going to do with greenery space? What does Second Street look like? I know there was an application for putting in more garbage cans downtown. I live and breathe downtown every day. I am working downtown. We are bringing things to life. Second and Third Street still need some love. So before you're even thinking of First Street, like I think some of the main arteries need some help. I'm glad the trees are going in, but there's still a lot more that can be done. So the plaza, I think, could be a really great uplift in the community versus First Street, where a lot of us park, honestly, over there, because that's where we can park. So I would put that lower on my priority list as I am downtown. If anyone has questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. And thank you for painting a picture for us. It's very helpful. Is there any other public comment? Yes.
My name's Tim Schechtel. I live at 3511 Sandlin Road in the Dalles. I'm a co-owner of the Mint Building, and I was here a year ago. I know most of you, but some of the newer commissioners are, I don't know, but that's who I am. We came last year with a proposal to help us do a build out at the Mint, and a number of things didn't allow that to happen, primarily on a time schedule. But we were also kind of hit at short notice with a building codes requirement to put a sprinkler system in our building. So that was one big kind of surprise. They wouldn't even give us a building permit to continue the renovation that we've been doing since 2005. When we acquired the building, we put a significant amount of renovation funds towards renovation of the warehouse, which it was at that time. So we're back again. We did ask you, hopefully last year, that we asked you, would there be funds if we came back in a year? And people shook their heads yes. And we also asked if we could come back with, I was calling the developmental funding agreement because it didn't fit any of the kind of packages that were currently offered, you know, the incentive program, commercial, then whatever, what's the third one? Yeah, there was a three kind of options, and our program really didn't fit any of those, you know, completely because we had fairly extensive extensive needs. So we came in with a large kind of grocery list. And it's basically the cost of the fire suppression system shot that project down. And the timing wasn't right because it would have been going into the busy season for the brewery, which operates their business out of there, which is one of the anchor tenants there currently. So I like what was being discussed regarding the priorities for further investment in downtown. And I would agree with several of you who are looking seriously at doing something different on First Street as far as funding that project and preserving what available indebtedness there is available on the tail end of the program for smaller projects, smaller businesses, just be focused on that. So we were able to get a portion of our project going with the incentive program. We were bringing in some additional outside funding that we didn't have last year. We streamlined our project and cut it way down to what we thought would be the minimum and most focused investment to get a build out for Free Bridge Brewing, get it going so they could expand their business quickly. So we have that going. We have signed contracts. The 50% match or $50,000 matching incentive program has helped a great deal. We're underway, but we still have a shortfall. And so we would like to be able to come back and discuss those needs sometime soon. So thank you for the work and the considerations on how to use those funds wisely.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Aaron Vance.
Yes. Hi. Hold on. I'll just get my video going.
Okay.
Okay. So my name is Erin Vance. I am also at 3511 Sandlin Road in the Dalles. Tim is my husband. However, I do not have a personal financial stake in the Mint. His business partner, Richie, I believe, is also on this Zoom call. But I just want to say that I am a speech pathologist working again in the North Wasco County School Districts. And I've lived in the Dalles since 2009. One of the things that's special for me, and I believe the community, is that when I first moved here, Aaron Glenn Wines was in the Mint, and that became my social spot, as a lot of people in town would go there on the weekends. Then I started working there on my off hours from school, and that's how I met Tim. But I also grew my own community at that building with a lot of the local community members. And I just want to say that even though Tim had to close the winery in 2011 due to the financial stresses of at that time, even beyond that, he would give the space to local nonprofits such as the Next Door and Families First and Haven to hold fundraisers in that space. He did not charge a fee. And even though he no longer had his own business there, he ended up working hard to pay back the city, McEd, I believe it was, what they had given as a loan to him back in 2005 to get the business going. And so I just feel that Urban Renewal has talked about in the past and tonight a return on investment. And that was actually one of the reasons given last year for not giving Tim or the Mint a grant. And I just feel that there is no greater return on investment in our community than to have people who stay, people who could easily have left in 2011 or since, but instead they're determined to stay and invest their own money and trying to just build that community and that community spirit. So I'm also in agreement that the idea of more open air spaces or more restaurants, sure, that's fine. But are they right there on the docket? Are they willing to come into our town and put in both the financial and the emotional investment that Tim has already shown, and Richie, as well as Steve and Lori at Freebridge, to really invest in not just the community, but trying to rebuild that infrastructure from 1850. You know, there's a lot to be said for that. So anyway, thank you for your time, and that's it.
Thank you for your input. I appreciate it. Is there any other public comment? Okay.
Michael Leash, 306 Court Street. I'm working with Claudia, my mom back here, and we're doing a renovation of the Sigmund's Flowers Oaks Hotel building. Budget right now is about 800,000, which is a lot of money to think about putting into a building that where you're going to get your return on investment. So we think about the same thing in regards to all of the funds that will go in there. Luckily, we've been awarded a $200,000 grant from the state of Oregon to help fund all of the exterior things that we'll be doing from the facade to repointing all the brick, redoing all of the windows, and the cornices that are in desperate need of some work. So we also, as part of all of that, is a plan to put in 4 housing units upstairs that have lofts. They'll be slightly under 500 square feet, but they'll have their own bathroom and a little kitchen and stairways put in, and it's totally moving some of the walls within the upstairs. The way it's built out currently, it's currently 9 rooms, and we're going to change that into a total of 4 housing units, and that's the plan there. So anyhow, it'd be great to have some participation with Urban Renewal. We've already submitted an application, and hope to get with Josh and Dan in the coming weeks to a plan to come in front of you. So thank you.
Great, thank you. If, unless there's more public comment, is there? Yes, okay. Go ahead. And then after this, I'll move on to staff comments and updates. We've got some board members that need to squeak out.
Sorry. My name is Kelly. So, sorry, I'm nervous at first I'm here. So I live in the 901 East 7th Street. So I'm from China. I moved here since 2022. So the Dalles is my second hometown. So I love the Dalles. The same as I bought the Canton Rock building. It's kind of when we moved here, we try to start the business. We try a lot of business for the restaurant because my husband's a cook. We can't find the one we like. So when we come to the Dell, we look at this one. So my husband really like it. And then, so the house of 10 used to the owner, they've been have so many people who come to look at that restaurant. They don't like it because the building too old. They said we'd be falling down and not good and nobody wants to buy it, but they retire. They don't want to do. And then, so when we move here, we don't know we like it. And then, so when we take over the restaurant, we remodeling, change everything. So after, I think like 7, 8 years, so we have the big problem issue. So the sewer pipe was broke, the kitchen. So that's the second time remodeling. And we spend a lot of money digging the sewer pipe in the whole kitchen and the restroom. Remember the pipe at the under the ground is, I'm sure short. So it's in here. When I walk down, it's that deep, bury me. So, and then after we done that, and then, so we have the third time remodeling is the dining room, it's a sewer pipe, it's broke again in the restroom. And then after a few years, and then we said, oh man, so we have to digging the whole restaurant and the dining room and all the restroom, sewer pipe again. So since we have 17 years in the restaurant, we're remodeling 3 times, make the building stronger. And we fix the water outside too. And we cover the brick, fix the brick, and then so to make it stronger. And then, so after, during that many years of Matthew come over, they try to talk to me to try to do the new phase, urban renew some money, something like that. So I said, I don't want to do it because I'm too busy, you know, when I have restaurant. And then after the, for the pandemic, so I have family issue with my parents. So I have to pay my parent a business. So I sold my business, but I don't want to sell my building because building is my baby. It's my baby. I grew here. If I sold my building, I feel I lost anything. I'm not belong to the Dalles. I don't want to sell my income of the building. And then, so so after I sold restaurant, and then I had a little bit of time, I went to the seaside, something with the friend have fun. I look at all the building over there, at Long Beach or somewhere. They look so pretty. So I make all the picture and then send it to Brian. And then Brian in the, like, can you idea? So maybe I can talk to someone that they'll see, like, can we make the new face on my building? Because I really want to look at the new face on my downtown, make it look, you're welcome. And then so one day the girl called me, the owner, the deal right now, is like, hey, have the guy then want to talk to you. And then what's going on? I was nervous, what's going on? So then tell me, and we have some money, openly new, maybe we can help you do the new face or something. And I said, that's a good idea. That's what I want now. I think you read my mind because, and so that's a beginning story. So I talked to Brian and I said, hurry, because they have some money, can help me to make a new face. I look better. So that story, we beginning to all the drawing. So I received the last notice from Byron. It was Sunday night, 10:45. She sent me the drawing. She said, Carrie, hope you can bring that to the meeting. Show them that story. And then I emailed for them. And so all the picture. And so hopefully we can make that happen. And then I talked to all the owner over there. I said, I would like to make a new face on everything. They're so exciting, happy because all outside the building really old, especially Canton Walk, and then the Being a lot of things falling down. We did already many years ago, and then in the block building, something is falling down already, but we make it temporary safe now. So that's what I like to make that happen. And then I talked to the owner. They also exciting to. They all stayed there. We just signed all the contract last month. I told them we're going to new everything on the window, make a new face, look better. But I don't know when it will happen. They said we can wait. We okay. Even when we remodeling slow, we okay. But this long term for the Dell. And then when I have the restaurant, I know a lot of people from outside the country. So they love to come to the Dalles. So I really want to make a city, the Dell feel welcome, look good, nice, clean. That's what I to share with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding us what we do is important.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Architect, and the Kelly has Canton Walk and also what used to be the vote block. Those are the kind of the clamshell awnings going down to Federal Street, number of separate businesses in there. So Byron is developing designs for all of that in concert with the Meyer Building, owned by Bill Dick and family next to it.
Okay.
Could I make a super quick? I was just going to comment kind of on Josh's thing about First Street and the commitment of First Street. And when I think about business in our community and I think about, activity, the one thing First Street doesn't have, I mean, nothing against it, but it just doesn't have the vibrancy and the number of storefronts and the number of businesses. So, I mean, I think for context, our investment in First Street isn't the same as the investment that we might have opportunities or should be in other streets in our community. And it's nothing against First Street because it does face the freeway. So there's some potential there, but it's always been one of those like, well, what's there? And are people really walking down the street and are they vibrancy? So it's just something to think about. Thanks.
Okay. Staff comments. Project updates.
I have a couple of updates on other topics. Are we?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Three things. Two of them related. 315 Federal is a urban renewal project. We put 50,000 into that one. This is the grocery store in the former Brady's Market, former Chronicle, former Sawyer's True Value. He is looking at opening in mid-June. We found another tank under the sidewalk there, and we are working to pull that one out. And that leads to my second topic. The city is a recipient of a $500,000 EPA brownfield grant. This totally replenishes the former coalition funding. We have to be careful in saying we don't have the money yet. We have to apply a second time. We applied, we got it. Now we have to go through the application process to get it. And that makes sense from a federal perspective.
No,
So
but it's the
we have to
federal
go through it
government.
carefully.
So.
It's a competitive procurement process. Finally, we talked about all the different urban renewal projects earlier. We have a digital map now that's been prepared thanks to the work of Ann Morehouse, thank you. Morehead, our highly talented, rare volunteer that we've been splitting between the urban renewal and the chamber. And so you'll be able to go to our website. There are a number of pins on there. You follow a pin, it leads to a photo, it leads to a narrative, and there are, I think, 72 different projects on there, including some that were not completed, going back way back when we pulled off the western part of the district. But most of them are blue. That means completed. That's extent of my comments.
Yeah, and I know everybody's got a jet. Just wanted to point out Ann's great work on the Getchell building, the Illuminate the Dalles event. We had about 80 people there on Friday. Really cool. It's there for a long time, so you didn't miss too much because it's going to be there every night. But if you haven't seen it yet, take a look. It's really cool. Wait until about 9:30 and the colors really start popping. And yeah, just another great thing that Ann has guided us through, and another project funded by the Urban Renewal Agency. So we appreciate the support in that project. And that's it for me.
Okay. Any board member comments before I wrap it up?
Yes.
Sorry.
No, go for
I
it.
had a question, like you talked about the website and is that up now? Is that something we can see now, or is it something coming? Perfect. Okay, that's fine. Nope. We can take a look at it and give you feedback. Cool. Okay. Well, that'll be great. And I just want to say, I thought this discussion today was good. I thought there's a lot of good information. I know sometimes it probably seems like, oh, we're not on the same page, but I think this discussion helps us get on the same page and move forward. So I'm happy what the discussion happened today and where we're headed. And I know that First Street's still kind of a challenge for us, but we'll get there.
Yes, good point. Thanks to everybody. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting now. Thank you.
Thanks.